The canine wouldn't let anyone near. That's what the paramedic said when he burst through the ambulance bay doors. And for a moment nobody moved because nobody knew what to do with that sentence. Then Faye Renner saw it. A Belgian Malinois, maybe 65 pounds, standing with all four legs planted on the chest of the man on the gurney, not barking, not lunging, just watching. Its vest read Army K9 in faded block letters, and there was a gash above its left ear that had crusted over with dark blood. The dog's eyes moved from face to face with the slow, methodical attention of something trained to assess threats and had found the entire room to be full of them. "We've got a GSW upper left chest," one of the paramedics called out. "2 IVs established en route, pressures at 80/50 and dropping. Pulse ox is." "Get the dog off him," Dr. Neil Bertrand said. He was already in gloves, already moving forward, already the person filling the most space in the room. The dog's lip curled back. Bertrand stopped. "Animal control is 12 minutes out," the charge nurse, Rowena Cho, said from the station. "We could try." "Sedation." Bertrand turned to the nearest resident. "Get me ketamine." "Don't." Faye said it quietly from the back of the room, and nobody turned around. "Don't," she said again, louder, and this time Bertrand looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, which he probably was. She'd been on night shift at Millhaven Regional for 11 months. She'd handed Bertrand instruments during 4 codes, pre-drawn medications for 6 procedures, and covered for a resident during a particularly bad week when he'd nearly missed a dissecting aorta. He still didn't know her name. "Sedation is going to agitate it before it works," she said, pulling on gloves as she moved to the front of the room. "And this dog has been trained in bite work on 3 continents. You do not want it agitated." Bertrand's jaw tightened. "And you are?" "Renner, trauma bay, 2-3 years." She stopped at the edge of the gurney and crouched slightly, making herself smaller, hands loose at her sides. "Give me 30 seconds." "We don't have 30. She wasn't listening to him anymore. She was watching the dog. The animal tracked her approach with ears forward and body rigid. Faye kept her eyes soft, her movements slow. She stopped 2 feet away, far enough that the dog could process her without feeling cornered. Then she exhaled once, steady, the kind of breath she'd learned to use when a dog was deciding whether to trust her, and she whistled. 3 short notes, low, high, low, the sequence that meant downstay in the vocabulary of army working dogs. The Malinois dropped off the man's chest like its joints had been cut. It sat beside the gurney and looked up at Faye, and its tail moved once, a single slow sweep. The room was so quiet that the oxygen monitor's beeping sounded obscenely loud. "Move," Faye said to the trauma team, and they moved. She stayed at the dog's side while Bertrand ran the resuscitation, one hand resting on the animal's head. The Malinois leaned into her leg and panted softly, watching the doctors work on its handler the way a partner watches someone across a room. Focused, counting on them, unable to do anything but wait. The soldier was young, late 20s, maybe 30. Ranger tab on the remnants of his uniform, which someone had partially cut away. His name tape read Tanaka. He had the kind of hands that came from years of physical work, knuckles mapped with old scars, and there was a newer scar along his left jaw that looked about 18 months old. Faye knew the origin of that kind of scar without needing anyone to explain it. She'd earned a smaller version of the same one on a road outside Mosul in 2019. "Pressure's coming up," the resident called. 88/60. "Get me a chest x-ray and type and cross," Bertrand said. Then, without looking away from his patient, Renner. "Yes. You know anything about chest tubes?" "Some." "Then get over here." The dog walked with her. They stabilized Tanaka well enough for the OR, and Faye stood in the trauma bay afterward with the dog sitting at her feet, both of them watching the gurney disappear through the double doors. The room smelled of antiseptic and the particular metallic quality of a near miss. That was impressive. Faye turned. A man she didn't recognize stood in the doorway, medium height, plain dark jacket, the posture of someone who had once been required to hold a certain kind of stillness and never fully let it go. He was showing her a credential case. Army side. Special Agent Frank Dillard. "The dog," he said, nodding toward the Malinois. Most people stepped back. Most people don't know the commands. And you do. I did. Faye crouched and checked the cut above the dog's ear, superficial, already clotting. She found some gauze on the crash cart and pressed it gently against the wound. The dog didn't flinch. His name's Atlas, according to the vest. How did you know it was a him? Body structure, proportions. She wrapped the gauze loosely. And the way he carries himself. Females tend to be slightly more reactive in close quarters. He's deliberate. Dillard studied her for a moment. You were a handler. That's in my file if you're looking. I was. Staff Sergeant Faye Renner, Army Veterinary Corps, dual certified handler, 2 deployments, Mosul and then Deir ez-Zor, honorable discharge in 2021. He paused. You went to nursing school after you got out. Nursing school takes 2 years, fewer IEDs. Dillard didn't smile, but something in his expression shifted toward something that wasn't quite suspicion anymore. Sergeant Tanaka was transporting evidence when he was shot, a micro SD card, military-grade encryption. It was in his left cargo pocket when the paramedics loaded him. It's not there now. Faye stood. You're telling me someone took it. I'm telling you it's missing. Between the field and this room. That's the window, yes. Atlas pressed his nose to the back of Faye's hand. She let him scent her, and he settled. You need to know who was in contact with Tanaka between the ambulance bay and this room, she said. I need to know everything, Dillard said. Starting with why that dog follows you, like you've known each other for years. Dogs follow competence. It's not complicated. She handed him the list of personnel who'd worked the bay. That's where I'd start. She went back to her floor. The night continued the way nights at Millhaven always did. A chest pain in room 4 that turned out to be anxiety. A pediatric fever that turned out to be an ear infection. A man in his 70s with a broken wrist who kept trying to fill out the paperwork himself, stubbornly left-handed, even though his dominant hand was the one in the splint. Faye helped him with the forms and didn't comment on it. By midnight, she was restocking the supply cabinet on the east wing when Rowena Cho appeared beside her. Sid is still downstairs, Rowena said. She was holding a tablet, scrolling something Faye couldn't see. They want a list of everyone who touched the trauma bay in the last 3 hours. I know. I already gave mine to Dillard. They asked about you specifically. Rowena didn't look up from the tablet. Why a nurse would know how to control a military working dog. Because I was a handler before I was a nurse. Faye slid a box of gloves onto the shelf. Did they ask you the same thing? They asked everyone the same thing. Rowena tucked the tablet under her arm. Just letting you know how it looks. New staff always gets scrutinized harder. I've been here 11 months. Like I said, Rowena walked away. Faye watched her go. Something in that exchange was wrong. She turned it over quietly in the back of her mind, the way she turned over everything, not forcing it, just letting it sit where she could keep seeing it. Rowena had come to deliver information that served no operational purpose. She hadn't asked about the patient. She hadn't asked about the dog. She'd come to tell Faye that people were watching her, and she'd framed it as a kindness. Faye had been deployed twice. She knew what it felt like when someone was trying to redirect your attention. She finished the restock and went to find Dillard. He was in the family consultation room on the ground floor with 2 other agents whose names she didn't catch. He looked up when she knocked. Tell me what the card contained, she said. That's classified. I need context to help you. Dillard looked at her for a moment, then gestured to the chair across from him. The other agents moved toward the door. When the room was down to the 2 of them, he said, Weapons diversion. Army supply depots in the southwest. Someone has been skimming munitions and gear from outgoing shipments for at least 6 years, rerouting them to non-government buyers. Cartels, Faye said, among others. And Tanaka found proof. Tanaka spent 4 months building proof. Names, dates, transaction records, photographs of handoffs. The card was the only complete copy. Faye was quiet for a moment. 6 years ago, I filed an inventory discrepancy report from a forward supply point in Syria. 3 crates of 5-6 that didn't match the manifest. My unit supply officer told me it was a logging error and marked it resolved. She met Dillard's eyes. I never heard anything else about it. Dillard went very still. What was the supply officer's name? The fob fell under 18th Airborne Corps Logistics, but the senior officer overseeing supply operations at the time was a major. His name was Edmonds, Ray Edmonds. Dillard pulled out his phone, typed something, and turned the screen toward her. A photograph. A man in his late 40s, silver-haired, in a colonel's uniform, service ribbons across his chest, 23 years in the Army. Colonel Raymond Edmonds, Dillard said, logistics commander at Fort Callum for 4 years. He's the one Tanaka was building a case against. The room felt colder than it had a minute ago. He knows you filed that report, Dillard said, or his people do. It's probably why your name is already in his system. Which means I'm not just a witness to tonight. Faye looked at the photograph. I'm a loose end from 6 years ago. That's my read, yes. Atlas appeared in the doorway. Faye looked up. The dog was supposed to be in a secure area near the loading bay where Dillard's team had set up a temporary post. Atlas looked at Faye, looked at Dillard, looked at Faye again. How did he get out? Dillard said. They can open lever-handled doors. Faye stood. He came to find me because something's wrong. Atlas turned and walked back down the hall. Faye followed. The dog led her to the east stairwell, up 2 flights, and stopped outside the hospital's records storage room, a windowless space on the 2nd floor that nobody used much past 7 p.m. The door was ajar. Light from inside fell across the hallway floor in a thin line. Atlas sat. His ears were forward. His body was coiled. Faye pushed the door open slowly. Rowena Cho stood at the far end of the room with a small evidence bag in her hand. Inside the bag was a micro SD card. The 2 women looked at each other. How did you get that? Faye said. Rowena's expression didn't change. You should go back to your floor. That's Tanaka's card. You don't know what this is. I know exactly what it is. Faye stepped into the room. Atlas moved with her, pressing against her left leg. And I know you just tried to plant doubt about me with the CID agent downstairs, so they'd be looking at me instead of you while you walked that out of the building. Rowena's jaw tightened. You don't understand the situation. Explain it to me. Something shifted in Rowena's face. Not guilt exactly, but exhaustion, the kind that came from carrying something heavy for too long. My brother, she said, he owed people. A lot of money. Edmund's organization was the lender. They told me all I had to do was pass information, patient transport schedules, who came through the trauma bay, what CD asked when they came in. She looked at the bag in her hand. This is the last thing. I give them this, and my brother is clear. Your brother isn't going to be clear, Faye said. They don't let people go. They just own more of them. You don't know that. I've been in the places where people who made that calculation ended up. Faye extended her hand. Give me the card, Rowena. Rowena took a step toward the door. Atlas rose from his sit, not growling yet, but fully attentive, 65 pounds of purpose and muscle, watching Rowena the way he'd watched the trauma room. Every line of his body said he was waiting on one word. Rowena stopped. I'm not going to chase you, Faye said, but he will, and I won't call him off as fast as I called him down. She kept her hand out, palm up, please. Rowena stood there for a long moment. Then she set the bag in Faye's hand, sat down heavily on a filing cabinet, and pressed both palms over her face, and her shoulders dropped, and she didn't say anything else. Faye radioed Dillard. What came next moved fast, the way things always fast once the first piece falls. Dillard's team locked down the hospital's exits. Local police coordinated the perimeter. Rowena was taken into custody quietly, in the records room, without anyone on the overnight shift noticing except a candy striper who later told her friends she'd seen a lot of suits near the elevator. Faye was standing in the ambulance bay, Atlas beside her, when Colonel Edmonds walked through the doors. He wasn't in uniform. Dark jacket, dark pants, the kind of unremarkable appearance that let a person move through a hospital without anyone thinking to stop them. He looked at Faye the way powerful men look at obstacles, with mild irritation, the temporary inconvenience of something that would shortly be resolved. Staff Sergeant Renner, he said. It's been a while. It's just Renner now. He glanced at Atlas. The card was retrieved. By CD, yes. Something flickered across Edmonds' face. He recalculated. You're the one who… He stopped. You were a handler. You're the nurse who took control of the dog. You're 6 hours late to that information. Faye watched his hands. They were still. Your person is in custody. The card is with Dillard's team. Whatever you came here to do, you came too late. I came to finish something I should have finished 6 years ago when your report crossed my desk. He took a step forward. That was a mistake. I should have flagged you then. You should have not run a weapons diversion scheme. Faye didn't step back. That would have been the better choice. Atlas stepped in front of her. He didn't growl. He didn't need to. He simply stood between Faye and the colonel, all of his weight forward, every line of his body communicating the same thing without words. Edmonds looked at the dog, then at Faye, and for the first time his expression shifted from irritation to something else. Uncertainty. Federal agents. Dillard's voice came from behind Edmonds. Colonel Edmonds, hands where I can see them. Don't make me ask twice. Edmonds didn't run. Faye had half expected him to. Men like him usually believed in their own ability to talk their way out, but he just stood there while Dillard's team moved in, and he looked at Faye over his shoulder as they cuffed him, and whatever he was thinking, he kept it to himself. They took him out through the ambulance bay into a night that smelled like rain. Atlas sat down at Faye's feet and leaned against her leg. She rested her hand on his head. Good boy, she said quietly. You did good. Sergeant Victor Tanaka came out of surgery at 4 a.m. He was intubated and sedated for another 6 hours, and when they finally let him breathe on his own, the first thing he did was ask for Atlas. Faye was still there. She'd clocked out at 7 a.m. and not left, and nobody had asked her why, and she hadn't tried to explain it. The ICU nurse brought her back to Tanaka's room. Atlas was already at the bedside, chin resting on the mattress rail, tail moving in slow arcs. Tanaka's hand found the dog's head without him having to look. Faye Renner, Dillard said from the doorway. Army vet, nurse, the person who saved your operation and probably your life. Tanaka looked at her. His voice was rough, the one who called Atlas off. Downstay. He listened better than most people I've worked with. Tanaka almost smiled. His hand kept moving through Atlas's fur. I thought I'd lost him in the field. When I went down, I couldn't see him, and I thought, he stopped. He stayed. That's his job, Faye said. Yeah. Tanaka closed his eyes, then opened them again. I hear Edmonds is in custody. As of about 3 hours ago. The card. Dillard has it. NSA is running decryption. She sat in the chair beside the bed. It's going to hold. You built it right. Tanaka was quiet for a moment. There were 37 names on that card. People who took the weapons, people who moved the money, people who knew and didn't stop it. He looked at her. That discrepancy you flagged in Syria. That was one of the first shipments. If someone had listened to you then… They didn't. Faye said it without bitterness, just as fact. But you did the work. It counts. Dillard offered her a position in the hallway, the same way these offers always seem to happen, standing up, in transit, like it was less formal that way. CID medical consultant. She'd worked cases involving military personnel brought into civilian systems. Her nursing credentials plus her service background plus whatever this night had demonstrated about how she operated under pressure. I'm a floor nurse, she said. You're a lot of things. Floor nurse is one of them. I like my job. You like being invisible. Dillard said it without cruelty, just observation. You came from a career that required you to be essential, and then you went into a job where you could disappear. I'm not judging the choice. I'm saying there's another option. Faye looked at the ceiling tiles. At the fluorescent light that flickered slightly at the end of the hall, the one that maintenance kept being asked to fix and kept not getting to. 11 months of looking at that light. Give me a week, she said. You've got it. She took the position. Not right away. She stayed at Millhaven through Tanaka's discharge, watched him walk out under his own power 6 weeks later with Atlas beside him, healthy and intact, the cut above the dog's ear healed to a thin white line. She finished her pending cases. She trained the 2 junior nurses who'd been working Trauma Bay too and had never had someone actually explain the logic behind anticipation. behind why you pre-draw certain medications before you think you need them, behind why you watch the physician's hands instead of waiting for the verbal order. Brooks, the younger one, caught on fast. She was going to be good. On her last shift, Bertrand stopped her in the hall. He'd been awkward around her since the night of the code, since the moment he'd realized she'd been anticipating him for 11 months, and he hadn't once learned her name. Renner, he said. Dr. Bertrand. The trauma liaison position. He cleared his throat. I recommended you for it. I want you to know that. Thank you. She meant it. I should have noticed sooner. People do better when they stop looking through each other, she said. Not a criticism, just true. He nodded once, and she went to finish her shift. 7 months after that night, she was at a CID field office in San Antonio when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Is this Faye Renner? A man's voice. Young, maybe mid-20s. Careful, like he'd practiced the sentence. Who's asking? My name is Aaron Prescott. You don't remember me, but I was in Deir ez-Zor, 2019. My convoy was hit on Highway 4, 2 miles east of the checkpoint. A pause. You were the medic. Faye sat down in the nearest chair. She remembered Highway 4. She remembered the way smoke looked against a flat white sky, the smell of burning rubber and hot metal. A private with a leg wound who kept asking about his sister's birthday, whether he'd make it home in time. I remember, she said. I'm in Dallas now. I run a physical therapy practice. I got out in 2021, finished my degree, and his voice broke slightly and steadied. I have a daughter. She was born 4 months ago. Her name is May. He stopped again. I named her after my mother, but I almost named her Faye. I wanted you to know that. Faye pressed her fingertips to her mouth and looked out the window at the San Antonio skyline, flat and bright in the afternoon heat. I'm glad you made it home, she said. Because of you. Because you held on, she exhaled slowly. How's May? He laughed, and it was a real laugh, loose and surprised. Perfect, loud. She has my grandmother's ears, and she hates sleeping. He paused. I saw your name in a news piece, the Fort Callum case. I figured you were still doing it, still saving people. Still trying. Good. His voice settled into something quiet and certain. That's good. The world needs people who try. She stayed on the phone longer than she'd planned. He told her about the practice, about May, about the neighborhood near a park where he took his dog in the mornings. She told him about the new position, about Tanaka's recovery, about Atlas, who had been reassigned to a trainer at Fort Bragg and was reportedly doing well. She told him about Brooks, the junior nurse who'd caught on fast, the one who'd probably be running her own floor inside 3 years. When they hung up, the office was quiet around her. The afternoon light came through the blinds in long stripes across the floor. She thought about what it meant to do work that no one saw, the way it accumulated anyway, in other people's lives, in daughters almost named Faye, in soldiers who ran physical therapy practices and took their dogs to parks in the morning. It didn't disappear because no one was watching. It just went on without applause, the way most of the important things did. Faye Renner had spent 3 years after her discharge trying to make herself small enough to go unnoticed. She understood now that she'd been confused about what safety looked like, that invisibility and safety weren't the same thing, had never been the same thing, and that the years she'd spent trying to disappear were not years of protection, but years of subtraction. She opened her laptop and went back to work. She was done subtracting.